president up here. I voted for you. Wait a minute. That guy on the grassy knoll's got a gun. He's gonna shoot the president. Holy smokes, I've got to do something. All right, Lee. Time to become an American hero.
November Network and Neapolis Media proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast with your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths come to die. Stay tuned, be right there.
The moment of truth for Jack Ruby. The accused slayer of President Kennedy's assassin is brought to the Dallas courtroom to hear the verdict of the jury. After 2 hours and 19 minutes of deliberation, the 8 men and 4 women have reached a decision based on testimony they heard during the month-long trial presided over by Judge Joe B. Brown. It was a trial marked by flamboyant theatrics on the part of the chief defense attorney, Melvin Belli, who tried unsuccessfully to have the case moved from Dallas. With the jury once more in the box, there comes the climactic moment of the drama that began in Dallas last November. Judge Brown, after warning against demonstrations, calls on the jury.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have reached a verdict. May I have it, Sheriff, please? We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder with malice as charged in the indictment and assess his punishment at death. Signed, Max E. Causey Foreman. So say you all, ladies and gentlemen. Is that your unanimous verdict? Will all of you whose verdict that is, please hold up your right hands. All right, Sheriff, here's your prisoner.
May I thank this jury for a victory for victory.
Keep your seats, please. There'll be no moving out. Don't let anybody out of the courtroom.
That is Attorney Belli's voice castigating the jury.
He says, "Don't you worry, Jack. We'll appeal this and take it out of Dallas," which did end up happening a couple years later, but not with Melvin Belli as his attorney. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Lone Gunman Podcast. This is episode 109. I'm your host, Rob Clark, and today we're going to be talking about a variety of things. We will get into the trial of Jack Ruby. I promise you that. But before we do, I just wanted to thank everybody out there for the great response to these shows, in the past month or two. Last week, I had Charles Cliff on. We talked about how Hollywood has treated the assassination in cinema. And it was a great show. I had fun doing it, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback about it. And we asked you, if we missed anything, let us know. And you did. And thank you to listener Eddie out there who let us know that we forgot about the movie Winter Kills. And I believe I talked about it on the show. I can't even remember when. And I can't believe we forgot all about it. But this is a movie from 1979. It was a theatrical release. It starred Jeff Bridges, John Huston, Anthony Hopkins, from Psycho as the Oswald character. But, these people weren't playing the real President Kennedy, the real Lee Harvey Oswald, things of this nature. It was a fictionalized, I think his name was President Keegan, and, it wasn't Oswald, it was some Italian name, I can't remember exactly, it's been a while since I've seen it. And then it was written by Richard Condon, who also wrote The Manchurian Candidate. So, Good book, good movie, and I can't believe we forgot it, Charles, but we did. And that's it. Everybody can check that out if they so choose. It is available on Amazon to rent for $3 if you want to watch it. They have DVDs available as well. I believe it's for as cheap as $11. So definitely go back and listen to that show. We talk a lot of 11/22/63, and God, I watched the newest episode, and little details are starting to bug me. But I promise I'll have Charles back on when the series is over and people have had a chance to watch it. And we'll get in and break it down totally. Just a couple things real quick that bug me. Excuse me. They skipped over New Orleans and Mexico City. They just skipped ahead 6 years or 6 months. Totally left it out. So I was kind of disappointed in that. They didn't have to go through 6 months in, however long it was that he was in New Orleans. But it would have been nice, to see, a couple cut scenes, with Guy Bannister and him handing out leaflets and him getting arrested, him going on the radio and kind of making a name for himself. That would have been interesting to see, but it didn't happen. And the Oswald character, it's not a big deal, but it kind of bothers me that he has a very faint goatee, a very faint mustache and goatee. It's really short, but this Oswald is not clean shaven, and it just watching him. I mean, he looks so much like Oswald and sounds so much like Oswald that little bit of facial hair just takes you right out of it. So I wish they would have just kept him clean shaven. But like I said, these are little, minor things. And but I'll have Charles back on and we'll get into it and really, really break it down good. What else? Oh, I want to also thank another listener for this little gem that I'm about to play you here. And look, they're gift horses over there. And the reason I keep bringing them up is because it's so laughable. I just want to share how ridiculous that these guys are over there at Jim Fezzer's radio show. And it bugs me, okay, because I go on YouTube and look, and their shows have thousands of views. I've never had an episode of my show get over 900 listens. And I have 109 shows now. Not one of them has ever gotten over, it hadn't even sniffed 900 listens. And it just bugs me because I would put any of my shows up against any of theirs any day of the week. As far as, accuracy for one, research for another, actual research. So here, enjoy this little sound clip, and you'll understand why I'm playing it. Listen very closely, okay? Very closely. Here we go.
Hi, my name's Gary King, and I've assembled the most formidable JFK team on planet Earth. We've got Dr. James Fetzer, Larry Rivera, who is the #1 researcher in the world today when it comes to new research, and we've got Don Fox, who's not afraid to look a little bit deeper than anyone else. So if you're interested in what happened to the 35th President of the United States, then I invite you to our show. It's called The New JFK Show, and it's on YouTube. Go to Gary King YouTube channel, and we've got over 90 shows archived for you there. So if you really want to know the truth, and knowing that over 9 out of 10 researchers are working the other side of the street in a sea of disinformation, I pledge to you the truth about JFK. Go to Gary King YouTube channel and find out your true history.
So I hope everybody caught that. Well, not just the horse shit at the beginning about them being the greatest researchers that ever lived. But also, their show that's about the 33rd president, Harry Truman. But they call it the JFK show. And their graphics say the JKF show. I'm just trying to illustrate how ridiculous these guys are over there. The greatest researcher alive is Larry Rivera. I mean, come on. Come on. What original research has Larry Rivera done? Exactly. He's dredged up old research out of the Weisberg archives. Okay. He's dug up Fred Newcomb's grave and brought us all this other nonsense again. You know, he's a proponent of the Oswald in the doorway theory, which is total crap. So tell me again how this guy is the greatest researcher alive. I mean, come on, dude. Seriously? And yeah, go back and listen. Rewind. He said the 33rd president, which is Harry Truman. Okay, JFK was the 35th president. You know, if you're going to do a show about JFK, you might want to actually look up and see exactly which president he was. You know, this is just basic stuff that you should know and get right, especially if you're going to do a promo. Get your facts straight, please. I mean, you sound ridiculous and amateurish, as Jim Fetzer would call it. So, you know, I hope everybody got a laugh out of that. I know I did. That's for damn sure. Because, you know, and they tell you if you want the truth, to go over there and listen to their show. That 9 out of 10 researchers are working on the other side of disinformation. That's the biggest joke in the world, because their show is nothing but disinformation. Nothing but disinformation. You know, it's laughable to me. But then again, it bewilders and befuddles me because their show is listened to by thousands of people. And that's just on YouTube. That's not including who listens on, you know, the Real Deal post on his blog spot. And this is why we fight. This is why we fight them. This is why we expose their myths for exactly what they are and try to show you, you know, the JFK community and, you know, the right way to research and research is totally wrong, is leading you down a dead end path, or, you know, just the wrong path altogether, because, you know, you're going to waste your time wading into the LBJ did it, you know, Oswald in the doorway, 30-second limo stop Fantasyland, and you're going to wake up a couple years from now and be like, what? Where was I at? Oh, Fetzer had me hypnotized from his monotone, repetitive voice. Oh, but that's why this is where research comes to shine and myths come to die. Right here on the Lone Gunman Podcast, we always keep it real and try to bring you correct information. I'm not going to sit here and preach that, hey, you listen to me and everything I say is the God's honest truth and it's gospel and you can take it to the bank and nobody can argue with me. Because here's the thing. I'm accessible. I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. Anybody and their brother can talk to me. I have a website where I have comment section. You know, anybody in the world can say anything they want to me or ask me a question or anything. Their stuff is totally closed off. They don't acknowledge anything. They're not on social media. You know, I don't even know if Gary King has a computer. Okay? But it's ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. You know, you can't argue with these people. What they say is gospel. It's written in stone. And if you argue with them, then you're a disinformation asset. Well, that's just ridiculous. So this is why we fight. This is why, you know, we try to expose them for the frauds that they are. I don't even know what they're doing over there. I mean, seriously, you know, it's ridiculous. But anyway, enough of that crap. This is the Lone Gunman Podcast, and we're going to be talking about Jack Ruby and the trial of Jack Ruby, because there's a lot of interesting aspects to it. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. Okay, millions of people all over the world saw Jack Ruby murder Lee Oswald or shoot him in cold blood in front of the cops, and he was arrested on the spot. You know, so there's not much of a defense. You know, he can't say I didn't do it because, hello, sir, we have you on film right here doing it. Okay, so the only defense becomes whether or not it was a spur-of-the-moment decision without malice or forethought. Because that is where the time gets you. Okay? or you could prove that you were temporarily insane, or that you're just insane, period. And you're not in control of your own actions. And this is the route that they went. Now, Jack Ruby had a myriad of attorneys. His first one was a fellow by the name of Tom Howard, who was actually one of his friends that he knew. He was also Henry Wade's friend. Now, they were always on opposite sides in the courtroom, but were often seen together, after court, knocking back a few at the local bar. They were buddies. And when Jack Ruby was arrested, he didn't have a lawyer. Well, here comes, so I guess Alexander called his buddy Tom Howard, and he shows up at the jail and, talks to Jack Ruby, and Jack agrees to let him be his lawyer. And of course, Tom Howard seizes his opportunity. He called it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And he went and boistered in front of the newsmen and stuff, and said all this crazy stuff. And not too long afterwards, Jack Ruby's brother Earl steps in, and he's like, "Look, Jack, you got to get rid of this idiot. He can't stop running his mouth. He's not looking out for you, blah, 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 blah." So they get an offer from Melvin Belli. And Melvin Belli is an attorney from California who made a name for himself, I guess, in personal injury cases. They called him the King of Torts, whatever the hell that means. And he was a voracious lawyer. He'd won a couple big lawsuits against some major corporations like Coca-Cola and some big builders down in Florida. But the Jack Ruby trial was his ultimate get. Okay. This is where Belli was going to make a name for himself. And by all accounts, he pretty much took it pro bono, as some lawyers do, these high profile cases, so they can make a name for themselves. So in the future, they can get high profile, what do you call them? Clients, high profile clientele that pay a lot of money. And he has a lot of clout in the courtroom, and he's respected by judges and this and that and the other. And so that's how it all works. So the Jack Ruby trial was Melvin Belli, his shining moment. Now he would go on, to involve himself in some other notoriety. And he was a good lawyer. He made over $600 million for his clients in his 50 or 60 plus year career. He was also notorious, and I think it was 1969, when the Zodiac killings were going on in San Francisco. The Zodiac killer asked that either Melvin Belli or F. Lee Bailey show up on this morning talk show, and that he would call in. And so they arranged this whole deal, and the Zodiac killer did call in and talk to Belli 54 times within a span of 2 hours. He was just playing games, but this drew Belli into, the spotlight once again. The Zodiac killer actually wrote Belli a letter with some clues in it. And then, this kind of catapulted Belli into like the notorious status where he, would get these, awesome clients. And his firm eventually went bankrupt in 1995. He was suing Dow Corning for breast implants that, it was like a class action lawsuit that a bunch of women had filed. And Dow Corning declared bankruptcy and couldn't pay their judgment. And Belli had paid out $5 million in, expert testimony and all these other legal bills and everything that he couldn't get back. And his firm had to file for bankruptcy. And he died in 1996, 1 year later. But back to, the Jack Ruby trial. I think it was sometime in January. Of course, after Ruby's arrested, Belli is his attorney. He teams up with I'm trying to find who it was. Let's see. Larry Schiller. Okay, there was somebody named Woodfield who worked for it's either the Dallas Morning News or the Dallas Times Herald. And they wrote this, I guess it was a 3-part, like mini novella entitled My Story. You know, he teamed up with Jack Ruby. And they sold this thing, you know, this 3-part thing, My Story, for about $45,000 to various media outlets and magazines throughout the world. Ruby's share of these sales were some $30,000, and out of his $30,000, he had to pay, or he didn't have to. I guess $11,000 was paid to Melvin Belli. He gave Tom Howard, his first attorney, $4,000. Charles Bellows, a lawyer from Chicago, got $2,500 for his help and advice after the trial. Associate counsel Phil Burleson got $1,000. The investigator on the case was paid $5,000. Doctors collected $5,000 in expert witness fees, and the rest was expended for miscellaneous defense purposes. One of his other attorneys, Joe Tannehill, a wealthy man, declined compensation until all other demands on the defense treasury were met. So less than 2 weeks after the publication of this My Story thing, you know, the trial was about ready to start. And it was not published anywhere in Dallas because they thought that it might interfere with, you know, the trial and him getting a fair trial. Not that he was going to get a fair trial anywhere in the world, let alone Dallas, let alone some other bum F town in Texas. You know, just about everybody saw Jack Ruby kill this guy or heard about it, you know. And it's kind of hard not to have an opinion about it, but I want to play you a clip from one of the jurors who actually sat, you know, on the jury for the Jack Ruby trial, and it's about 2 minutes long, and I'll be right back after this.
Sitting there in the jury box, looking at Jack Ruby every day, did you feel like you were looking at an innocent man who got caught up under intense circumstances, or did you think he was guilty?
No, I didn't think that he was guilty or innocent. I hadn't reached that point. I had no reason to believe really legally that he was either one. I was trying to keep my mind open for the evidence. But I felt very sorry for Jack Ruby. He looked alone. He looked forlorn. He just really looked pitiful. He never said anything, never smiled. I made eye-to-eye contact with him once or twice, is all, because he was in another world, seemed like, all the time. I know that one time the district attorney, the assistant district attorney, excuse me, who worked with Henry Wade, he and the other team, they were very sharply critical of Jack Ruby because they would malign him. They would almost heckle him because they called him the village idiot and all kinds of names in court. And this district attorney, I heard him say something about him, that Jack Ruby just sitting there. He said, "Doesn't he remind you of looking into the eyes of a crab?" And I thought, that's an awful thing to say, but then I looked at him and I thought, well, it does look like a crab. You know, his eyes were sort of fixed and had a vacant stare, I guess you'd say, and he looked like he was feeling his way through the world, and I really felt sorry for him. I just wanted him to say something and apologize and say, "I'm sorry, and let's all go home," and I would have gone with it. But it didn't work that way.
Yeah, it didn't work that way. And what this juror was referring to was, I guess, the courtroom strategy of Jack Ruby's lawyers and Melvin Belli to make it appear that Jack Ruby was not of sound mind, meaning insane, or mentally ill, or brain damaged, or something else. They went so far as to say that he was born with an abnormally large head, which would have caused problems when he was born because it would have gotten squeezed in the birth canal and would have caused brain damage. Saying that because he'd been pistol whipped so many times growing up, he might have had brain damage from that, and he, which might have not caused him to think clearly. But look, Jack Ruby was a very business savvy kind of guy. He really wanted to be his own man, to do his own thing. And he was very much in control of his faculties when it came to his business, his dogs, his friends, his associates. We talked about his trip to see Robert McCown in 1959, I think it was. To request a letter of introduction to Fidel Castro. He was working on trying to send some Jeeps down there. Brokered some kind of a deal there. He was helping Louis McWillie, when he went to Havana. And when he came back, he kind of brokered some shipments of guns for McWillie to, Fidel Castro in Cuba. And, when it came to his business, Jack Ruby was very hands-on. He was the guy that took the copy down to the newspaper and made sure that every little detail was taken care of in the ads for the newspaper. He was in charge of, booking the entertainment for the club. He was in charge of bouncing. He was his own bouncer. If people acted up in his club, he was the one that got involved and would get in fights and throw people out, or threaten him if he needed to with his gun. He liked to feel like a big shot. He carried around thousands of dollars in his car and on his person, and he said he always had his gun with him for this very reason, and he's dealing with beautiful women. Nothing escaped Jack, no detail of business escaped Jack Ruby. So, when they're trying to paint this guy as some kind of an insane person, it just doesn't work. Insane people can't, start a business and run it as effectively as he was doing if they're insane. Which left the prosecution to either prove that he's not insane or, try to prove that he was put up to doing this. And of course, Jack Ruby did not want to admit that he was put up to doing this. Even on his deathbed, he claimed that, he acted on his own. There was no conspiracy, that, he made the rash decision to, shoot Oswald because he said, this guy shot his president and it called him a dirty rat or something to that effect when he shot him. He said, "You shot my president, dirty rat." Well, there's only one shot, but you get the gist. So yeah, it was, but the courtroom was very much a circus environment. His own lawyers were practically calling him retarded, calling him an idiot. Look at this poor sap. He's had such a hard life. He didn't have his parents around. He had, he was sent to an orphanage. He had to raise his brothers and sisters. This, that, and the other. Just on and on. Yeah, so that was the defense for Jack Ruby, and of course, it did not work. As you heard at the beginning of the show, the jury found Jack Ruby guilty of murder with malice, forethought, and sentenced him to death. Sentenced him to die. Now, when Jack Ruby talked to the Warren Commission, he had already been sentenced to death. He was already on death row in Texas. And he was very adamant about wanting a polygraph examination, or he wanted to be given truth serum. he was very much skirting around a whole lot of stuff. When he was talking to Earl Warren, when they came to see him, it was Earl Warren, I believe Joseph Ball, Gerald Ford was there. There was a Secret Service guy. Can't remember his name right off the top of my head. Bill Alexander was there. Joe Tannehill was there, acting as counsel, but he wasn't technically Jack Ruby's lawyer. Sheriff Decker was there. And, Sheriff Decker kept saying, look, you've been wanting to tell me your story for all these years, or, for the past couple of months, and I wouldn't let you. And he's like, be a man and tell this man who came thousands of miles to talk to you, Jack, tell him your story. And Jack kept saying over and over that he wanted a lie detector. And they tried to explain to him that, look, we can't just give you a lie detector and let you tell your story. We have to know your story. And then we can ask you yes or no questions pertaining to your story that you can answer yes or no to, and that we have something to compare it to. And Jack finally got the gist of it, and he tried to tell him that, Earl Warren, that his life was in danger. He tried to tell him that his own life was in danger. He tried to tell Earl Warren that his family, his sisters, his brothers, that their lives were in danger. And he told him, look, there's an organization here, the John Birch Society and General Edwin Walker. And that because of what he did, these people are now in power. And they are very dangerous people. And, he was worried that he wouldn't even make it back to the jail alive, let alone when he got to jail. Because, these people, the John Birch Society, they have people on the police force. They have people in jail. They have a very wide reach. They have judges. They have lawyers. They, the people that believed in the anti-communist movement and, the anti-integration movement, they were all over the place in society. And you might not even know who they are. And Jack Ruby was very scared. He wanted Earl Warren to take him back to Washington so he could personally tell the president the truth. And they assured him, look, when we get back, I will tell him, and, just tell us your story and we'll set it up. We will come back and we'll give you a lie detector test or a truth serum or whatever it is. So Jack Ruby finally relented, and about a month later, true to his word, Earl Warren came back to Dallas, and his team set up a lie detector test for Jack Ruby to take. Jack, there was a lot of problems with this lie detector test. There was a lot of, they told him the questions ahead of time, which I thought was weird and odd. There was a lot of, is that cuff bothering you, Jack? Are you okay, Jack? We just want to make sure you're comfortable, Jack. This, that, and the other. And, a lot of, like treating him like he's a celebrity. Like, I don't know. It just seemed weird to me. And a lot of experts who've looked at this lie detector test don't really give it much weight. The HSCA didn't give it much weight. But that's what Jack Ruby wanted, so that's what they gave him. And I believe the results of it are published in the War Information volumes. It appeared that he was telling the truth, but it's very hard to say. There was some deception indicated on a couple of questions that didn't really matter, because there's a procedure you're supposed to go through when you give somebody a lie detector test. You're supposed to, give questions that that they're going to be, that what the truth is. And then you're supposed to ask questions that have nothing at all to do with anything. And then you're supposed to ask, questions that have to do with something that you don't know the answer to, that you want to determine whether or not it is that they're lying in their body response. And of course, this is the 1960s. There's no computers involved. It's not really an exact science back then. So it's very hard to rely on these things. But what it appeared to me is that Jack Ruby wanted an excuse to be able to tell the truth. And he hinted at a conspiracy. He hinted at an organization that was pressuring him to do what he did. And his actions immediately after the assassination, kind of lead you in that direction. He's at the police station for the Friday night press conference. He's just mere feet away from Oswald in the hallway. He has his gun on him then. Maybe he didn't get a clear shot then. Maybe he didn't have the nerve yet. But, it's just, it's hard for me to believe that he wasn't overcome with grief that Friday night when he's mere feet away from Oswald. And he might not get another chance to shoot him, but he doesn't take it. He's not overcome with the prospect that Jackie Kennedy might have to come back to Dallas for the trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. The so-called excuse that Jack Ruby gave for doing what he did. And Tom Howard, his first attorney, actually admitted later on that he was the one who told Jack to use that excuse because it would be most sympathetic to him and it would look the best, as an excuse in court. They might have some mercy on him. He might, they might think of him as a hero. He might get 5 years with most suspended or something to that effect and, best chance to get out of things. But, I just don't understand how the official story of Jack, coming from Jack Ruby, that, it was just a matter of just the right place, just the right time. And, he just took this opportunity. He was overcome with the feeling of, I'm going to kill this guy. He said it flashed in his mind how incompetent the legal and judicial system is in Texas. And he wanted to make sure that this guy got what was coming to him. But he didn't on Friday night. He just kind of hung back and observed, and he even corrected, was it Bill Alexander or Henry? I think it was Henry Wade. He even corrected him, about the Fair Play for Cuba committee. And he even got an interview, I believe it was for KLIF. He got, it was either Wade or Alexander on the phone for them. He got these sandwiches made, and he took them to the radio station. And, he was just flitting all over town, and then he went back to his club. He was talking to, Harry Olsen for a couple hours and one of his dancers in the car, and everybody was really upset, and, they were trying to figure out what they're going to do, and then he goes and, real early in the morning, like 4:30 or 5 in the morning, grabs George Senator and Larry Crayford and goes out and takes pictures of, impeach Earl Warren billboards and, goes to the post office to find out who owns these P.O. boxes that's on these flyers and on these billboards. And it's just a big rigmarole, It's very hard to follow. I think he even goes to the synagogue at one point. He goes to dinner at one point. He's all over the place. He's all over the phone. He's talking to his sister. Just a whole lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden, that Sunday, at the last possible moment that the public is, at least until the trial, that the public is going to be able to see and get close to Lee Harvey Oswald, he takes his opportunity and pulls the trigger. Now, like I said, he didn't live long enough to actually get his second trial. It was granted to him a retrial in a different city in Texas. I believe it was in 1967. It was granted. And he did get his speedy trial when it came to killing Oswald. Of course, it happened November 24th, 1963. And he was sentenced to death in March of 64. So within 4 months, he was arrested, had his trial, and convicted and sentenced in less than 4 months after the crime. So, and this was the crime of the century up to this point. This was the most notorious crime, even a televised murder, the first televised murder in America. And, this was the O.J. Simpson trial of the 1960s. This was it. and it got a lot of press coverage back then. There's a lot of attention paid to it. And there's really only two possibilities when you get right down to it. Either Jack Ruby took it upon himself, for whatever his personal reasons are, to just kill another man that did nothing to him personally. You have to remember this, because to kill another man that did nothing to you personally, I mean, that's cold-blooded murder. You know what I mean? Like, that's cold-blooded murder. And if you're not a psychopath or a serial killer, it's just a very strange murder to kill someone else that did nothing to you personally. I could understand if Oswald killed his sister, and he was determined to get his revenge that way. But Oswald didn't do anything to Jack Ruby personally. This is why the whole thing doesn't make sense. This is why people believe that there was a conspiracy. And so you got to figure either, this reason that doesn't really make sense, or there was a conspiracy and Jack Ruby was put up to kill Lee Oswald. He was threatened to kill Lee Oswald, and he pretty much told her, Warren, look, they're threatening the lives of my sisters, my brothers, to do what I did. I'm as good as dead if I tell you the truth. They're as good as dead if I tell you the truth. I mean, it doesn't really get more plain than that. And, the Lone Nutters don't want to hear this. They just don't know what to do with it. And, neither do a lot of other people. And I was listening to a weird show today that I stumbled across. And they were talking about the Texas Sharpshooter fallacy. And this is one of those podcasts that is very like uppity, debunker, skeptic-y, douchey, psychological type thing, where they try to analyze these logical fallacies and these different aspects of logical fallacies. And there was one they were talking about today called the Texas Sharpshooter fallacy, where, looking at a very broad case, such as the Kennedy case, that we only are drawn to things that support what we already believe. And the illustration that they used was, okay, this Texas guy, he goes out on his farm, he's there at his barn, and he has his rifle, and he starts shooting at the barn. So he goes over after he's done shooting, and he looks at the barn side of the barn, where he was hitting it, and he looks for the best cluster and the best shots, and then he draws a bullseye around that. And that's what their allegory was to how conspiracy theorists look at a case. And I don't really agree with that, to be honest with you. I mean, I can see where it happens, most definitely, but their example was, of course, the whole Kennedy-Lincoln thing, where, well, Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln, and Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy, and Kennedy was killed in a Lincoln, which was made by Ford, and Lincoln was killed in a theater, the Ford Theater, and their killers both had 15 letters in their name, and they were both born on a Friday. They were both succeeded by people named Johnson. Yeah, it's a lot of coincidences between the Lincoln and the Kennedy assassination, sure. But I don't know exactly what they're trying to prove by, giving this as an example of some kind of a, conspiracy myth. I don't really understand it, because, a lot of these things are true about Kennedy and Lincoln. Is it just a coincidence? Yes, of course it's just a coincidence. There's no master, conspiratorial puppet master pulling the strings and putting all these people in place and making all these things happen just like this and that. Of course not. It's a coincidence. It's an eerie one, when you think about all the stuff, but a coincidence nonetheless. So, the podcast was called You Are Not So Smart. And I'll put a link up to the specific episode I'm talking about if you'd like to learn more about the Texas Sharpshooter fallacy and how they apply it to conspiracy theories. It's kind of interesting in a way, but listening to it, I kind of get irritated because it's just a bunch of uppity douchey people who think they're just so smart and think that they have everybody's figured out and why they reason this and why they believe that. Yeah, and it's almost like listening to Fetzer reason things. It's just but I can see their point on some things. Like if we believe Lyndon Johnson is the mastermind of the assassination, then we are just going to point to the evidence that supports our theory and ignore all the rest that does not. I understand that. But if I can draw a very good speculative argument based on facts, based on reason, based on logic, based on testimony of a scenario that could have possibly happened and was a conspiracy, then I think that trumps their little fallacy, But that's just me. It was kind of interesting to check out. So check it out. I'll put a link up over the website, tlgpodcast.com, if you want to check out that show. One more thing before we go. I wanted to share a story, and this comes from the book, The Trial of Jack Ruby by John Kaplan and John Waltz. And it's very interesting. I had never read it before or heard about it before. And let me try to find it here. Okay. Now, apparently, Jack Ruby was not the only person to murder somebody upon hearing that John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. Shortly after Jack Ruby shot and killed Lee Oswald in the basement of the Dallas Police and Courts building, another act of violence occurred in Sioux City, Iowa. There, on the afternoon of Sunday, November 24th, 1963, Vasya Michael Bohan, a 47-year-old dental technician, and his mother were seated in their living room of their home watching a television program about the funeral arrangements for President Kennedy. Suddenly, Bohan's 68-year-old stepfather entered the room and loudly cursed the assassinated president. Overcome with emotion, Bohan rose, picked up a pair of sewing scissors, and stabbed his stepfather 6 times, once in the mouth and 5 times in the chest. The older man fell to the floor dead at 2:52 p.m., 1 hour and 32 minutes after the shooting of Oswald. Bohan calmly telephoned the Sioux City Police Department to report his crime. Two police officers arrived shortly thereafter, and he surrendered without resistance. On Monday, November 25th, 1963, 1 day later, Bohan, like Ruby, was arraigned on a charge of murder. He pleaded not guilty and demanded a preliminary hearing. Bail was set at $10,000, and it was promptly posted, and Bohan was released from custody. Now, in December, Bohan changed his plea to guilty. On the day before Christmas, he appeared in the courtroom of District Judge George M. Paradise for sentencing. The judge had pondered the accused's crime and the atmosphere in which it had taken place. Referring to the assassination of President Kennedy, Judge Paradise stated that the entire nation was under stress and strain from the tragedy. He continued, but that is not a reason for a citizen of the nation to release his emotions to the extent of causing another tragedy. The defendant's deed, he concluded, would weigh forever on his conscience. He then sentenced Bohan to 8 years in prison and a $1,000 fine. The judge then suspended the entire 8-year prison sentence and ended the hearing by wishing the defendant a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Bohan paid his fine and went home. And Jack Ruby of course, that story ended in a very different and tragic way. That's it for this week, people. I hope you enjoy the show. Show me some love on Facebook and Twitter. Make sure you're sharing stuff, liking stuff. I see you in India listening. Saudi Arabia, what is up? I see you in Louisiana, Florida, California, all over the world, baby. This sumbitch is up to the satellite down directly to your ears, people. This is your boy. Peace. Benjamin Banger, freemusicarchive.org.